A mere 6 weeks after the terrifying attacks of September 11, 2001, lawmakers rushed a bloated 342-page bill through Congress called the USA Patriot Act. This legislation swept away 2 centuries of constitutional protections, allegedly to protect American citizens from further harm by mass murderers. How is it possible that the same U.S. Congress that today still can't manage to repeal Obamacare or pass any meaningful tax reform was able to craft such a detailed and expansive piece of legislation as the Patriot Act in a matter of mere weeks? The truth is that the USA Patriot Act was already in existence prior to 9/11. It was a piecemeal of egregious bills and proposals that the United States Congress didn't dare to pass because of how deeply it gutted citizens' rights to things like privacy and due process. But when the people are in a state of fear, they set aside the wise counsel of Benjamin Franklin and gladly trade away their rights for promises of safety and security. So in the wake of 9/11 and the spate of domestic anthrax attacks that was gripping the nation, those separate pieces of bad legislation were bundled together into one big bill, which was given a jingoistic name to play on the patriotic heartstrings of a traumatized public, and thus the USA Patriot Act was born. The co-author of the Patriot Act was a Jewish man named Michael Chertoff, who held dual Israeli and American citizenship. When the 9/11 attacks took place, Chertoff was the head of the U.S. Justice Department's Criminal Division. According to the USA Today, quote, in the minutes after the September 11th attacks, while Attorney General John Ashcroft was rushing back from Milwaukee, Michael Chertoff was calling the shots. From a 5th-floor office at FBI headquarters, above the streams of panicked people who flooded Pennsylvania Avenue, he set up shop in the Bureau's Crisis Center. For the next 20 hours, he directed the government's initial response to the most lethal terrorist attack in U.S. history. Chertoff went on to co-author the unconstitutional Patriot Act, which was rammed down the public's throats without debate, without discussion of the far-reaching ramifications of the legislation. As a journalist, I was following the Patriot Act closely. At the time, I wrote this, quote, perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the government's actions has been its attack on the Bill of Rights, the very cornerstone of our American Republic. The war on terror has seriously compromised the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights of citizens and non-citizens alike, from the USA Patriot Act's overbroad definition of domestic terrorism to the FBI's new powers of search and surveillance, to the indefinite detention of both citizens and non-citizens without formal charges. The principles of free speech, due process, and equal protection under the law have been seriously undermined. The result of all these actions has been the deliberate, persistent, and unnecessary erosion of the basic rights that protect every citizen, every non-citizen in the United States. A free society demands the rule of law. Without it, democracy is meaningless. The government has consistently refused to recognize the protections afforded to us by the U.S. Constitution, and in doing so, it has failed in its responsibility to maintain a democratic society that is both open to and accountable to the people. I wasn't alone in my concerns. When President George W. Bush nominated the author of the Patriot Act, Michael Chertoff, to replace Tom Ridge as the director of the newly created Department of Homeland Security, civil rights advocates all across the country raised serious questions about his fitness for the job. Even the ACLU said, quote, Michael Chertoff's record suggests that he sees the Bill of Rights as an obstacle to national security. After Chertoff left the Homeland Security post in 2009, he started the Chertoff Group, filling it with former CIA and Homeland Security insiders. The Chertoff Group is the very definition of the military-industrial complex. Using his government, intelligence, and military connections, Chertoff has made millions and millions of dollars capitalizing on our fears. In 2010, a host of news agencies blasted Chertoff for his practice of making fortunes by scaring the public. In November of 2010, The Huffington Post published an article titled "Fear Pays. Chertoff, ex-security officials slammed for cashing in on government experience." The article reads, quote, "Solemnly warning that the nation needed stronger security procedures, Chertoff patiently repeated his talking points on ABC News' World News Tonight, Fox News and Friends, CNBC's Squawk Box, and Bloomberg TV. Almost unmentioned in these appearances, Chertoff has a lot to gain financially if some of these measures are adopted. Between his private consulting firm, the Chertoff Group, and seats on the boards of giant defense and security firms, he sits at the heart of the giant security nexus created in the wake of 9/11, in effect, creating a shadow Homeland Security Agency. Chertoff launched his firm just days after President Barack Obama took office, eventually recruiting at least 11 top officials from the Department of Homeland Security, as well as former CIA Director General Michael Hayden and other top military brass and security officials. So we have to ask, what Michael Chertoff's company does is important for us to understand, and that is it acts as a go-between for security companies that are seeking lucrative government contracts and the legislators who actually give out those contracts. For example, do any of you even remember the days when we could go through the airport without having to take off articles of clothing or walk through naked body scanners or be subjected to sometimes sexually intrusive groping by the TSA? I remember. And I remember that it was Michael Chertoff who placed the government's first order for 5 Rapiscan scanners for airports. It was him who went on to tour the media circuit, advocating for the crucial need to expand the use of these scanners throughout America's airports. But what he didn't mention in any of those interviews was that he was going to directly profit from the sale of those scanners because his company represented OSI Rapiscan. But as we all know, these intrusive scanners, all of these TSA procedures, they don't make us any safer. In fact, just this week, CBS News published a report revealing that undercover testing of the TSA screenings continue to be an abysmal failure. The report said this, quote, "Homeland Security investigators found that more than 70% of the time, undercover officers were able to get through TSA checkpoints with mock knives, guns, and explosives." Well, that's slightly better than what the same undercover testing operation revealed 2 years ago when the TSA was producing a 95% failure rate. What the findings of this undercover investigation show is that they don't know what they're doing. And these findings were presented to the United States Congress this past week. So now that it has been proven that Michael Chertoff's security systems don't actually work, what do you think the proposed answer to the problem is? Well, if you guess that it's time to buy a whole new set of scanners, you would be right. The TSA's administrator, David Pekoski, told Congress that a newer CT technology is the most effective way to keep Americans safe. But the TSA needs a whole lot more taxpayer money to buy the machines. And former director of the Homeland Security Council, Frank Cilufo, said that terrorists are right now looking for vulnerabilities in our airport security so they can kill us. Therefore, the TSA needs millions and millions of dollars from Congress, or in other words, from you and me, to buy the latest scanner technology. Like the Department of Homeland Security itself, the TSA it was a post-9/11 creation. We didn't used to have this. We don't need it. Airport security existed before 9/11. Abolishing the TSA does not make us any less safe. Clearly, they are staggeringly incompetent at their jobs. But, like the good corporate puppets they are, members of Congress are falling in line to make those new payments that security officials are begging for. Homeland Security Committee Chairman Congressman Michael McCall of Texas, he said this week that his entire committee is very disturbed by what was presented to them, and they are now pushing for a full implementation of new scanners that create even more realistic 3D image scans of our belongings and perhaps even our bodies as we go through airports. Michael Chertoff is an agent for these scanner companies. He's using his government connections to lobby on behalf of his clients. He's a huckster for the military-industrial complex that is eating away at our rights to privacy and our freedom of movement. As a brief side note, George Soros used to own 11,300 shares of the OSI Rapiscan security until a news outlet reported on it, and mysteriously his shares were immediately sold. Well, I just want to emphasize this particular point one last time by quoting from the Washington Post, January 1st, 2010, quote, Since the attempted bombing of a U.S. airliner on Christmas Day, former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff has given dozens of media interviews touting the need for the federal government to buy more full-body scanners for airports. What he has made little mention of is that the Chertoff Group, his security consulting agency, includes a client that manufactures those machines. Now, if you're thinking that 2010 is too far back to go, then consider this article from September 14th of this year, just 2 weeks before the Vegas shooting. The headline reads, Rapiscan Systems, the truth about the publicly traded U.S. company OSI Systems and their paid-for Washington, D.C. swamp creatures. Quote, the Chertoff Group was being paid by OSI Rapiscan to lobby for Rapiscan's security screening products. This was a very successful sales strategy for Rapiscan to hire the Chertoff Group because Rapiscan sold over 175 million of these systems to the TSA. Now, in this same way, Michael Chertoff's company today is in position to capitalize on the Las Vegas shooting tragedy. As any business owner knows, the goal is to expand the market for your product. You want as many people to need what you have to sell as possible. So when your product is security equipment that is supposed to make you feel safe, what helps to expand your market is an environment in which people do not feel safe. Just like Chertoff used 9/11 to argue for airport scanners on behalf of his clients, it only makes sense that Chertoff is going to make the same case that in the wake of the deadly Las Vegas shooting, Vegas casinos, hotels, and other venues have to be made more secure through the installation of his clients' security scanners. Now, there are some who go so far as to question whether or not people within this industry actually helped to manufacture the shooting event in order to create a post-9/11 atmosphere in which to manipulate the public and cities like Las Vegas and others into ordering this security equipment. That's the theory that was espoused by a mysterious 4chan user named John in the weeks leading up to the October 1st shooting. Many of you have probably already heard about this. Roughly 2 weeks before the Vegas shooting, a man who appears to have had some foreknowledge of an upcoming mass casualty event posted 3 cryptic messages on the 4chan message board. In the first one, he wrote this, quote, if you live in Las Vegas or Henderson, stay inside tomorrow. Don't go anywhere there are large groups of people. Also, if you see 3 black vans parked next to each other, immediately leave the area. In the second message, he elaborated on this plot, writing, quote, it's called the High Incident Project. They want to make the American public think that places with extremely high security aren't safe. They're trying to create more regulations. You will see laws proposed within the next few years to put up more metal detectors and other security devices. Media and politicians will be saying places with lots of police need even more police. I can't guarantee anything will happen tomorrow, but Las Vegas is on their minds. And in this third and final message, John predicted that this upcoming mass casualty event would pave the way for Michael Chertoff and his client OSI Systems to make a fortune. He wrote this, quote, if their plan is successful, State of Nevada will pass a law in the future making all casinos have mandatory metal detectors and backscatter machines. Soon after, a federal law will be passed to put these machines in universities, high schools, federal buildings, you name it. OSI Systems and Chertoff are the main producers of these machines. Sometime around 2020, Chertoff and OSI will merge into a single company. After they merge, the owners will sell off all their stock and make billions in profit. Mr. Chertoff has been in contact with Sheldon Adelson. Mr. Adelson will become a huge sponsor of these machines, and he will be the first to put them in his casinos when the law passes. This is my last message for now. Don't expect me to return anytime soon. And that was it. But he raises a new name here. So we come to the billionaire casino mogul, Sheldon Adelson. Like Michael Chertoff, Adelson is a neoconservative Zionist whose loyalties are more with the state of Israel than they are with the United States. As NBC News reported back in 2010, Adelson gave a speech in Israel and was quoted as saying this, quote, "I am not Israeli. The uniform that I wore in the military, unfortunately, was not an Israeli uniform. It was an American uniform, although my wife was in the Israeli Defense Forces, and one of my daughters was in the IDF, and my our two little boys, one of whom will be bar mitzvahed tomorrow. Hopefully, he'll come back to Israel. His hobby is shooting, and he'll come back and be a sniper for the IDF." He went on to say, quote, "All we care about is being good Zionists, being good citizens of Israel, because even though I am not Israeli born, Israel is in my heart." Sheldon Adelson, who owns the Las Vegas Sands Corporation, is currently ranked as the 20th richest person in the world, with a net worth of over $30 billion. And as you'll see in this clip, it has clearly gone to his head.
And thankfully, according to Bloomberg,
you're the 10th richest man in the world.
10th, maybe but think about that. There's 7 billion people. That means there's 6,999,990,000 people that are not at my level.
Adelson is one of, if not the most powerful kingmaker in the country. Politicians like Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, and Donald Trump prostrate themselves before Adelson to win his favor and his money. In fact, when President Donald Trump flew to Las Vegas after the October 1st shooting, he first went to see Sheldon Adelson. It's not surprising that the president would go to visit Adelson. Sheldon and his wife were two of Trump's top campaign donors. The Adelsons had promised to contribute $100 million to the Trump campaign. The man has money, and with that comes power over people, a lot of it. So it's not a stretch to suggest that Adelson, who made his billions in the gambling industry, could play an influential role in ushering in a new era of security into the Las Vegas scene and well beyond that. As John from 4chan suggested, the Chertoff-Adelson partnership would seek to push for broad legislation that would require these OSI scanners to be installed all over the public sector. And if that were to happen, there would be a lot of money made in the process. Is John a true insider with access to knowledge about plans between Chertoff and Adelson? Or is he just a prankster, some guy who happened to make up a very specific but extraordinarily lucky guess? What I can say is that I have not personally seen any direct connections between Adelson and Chertoff, despite them sharing a strong affinity for Israel and a disdain for Iran. I've seen some FEC records of Chertoff and Adelson donating to the same political candidates, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Chertoff voted for Hillary Clinton and Adelson voted for Donald Trump. So if any of you out there know of any links between these men, whether in connection with OSI or otherwise, please share what you have with the rest of us down in the comments section. But what I can say for sure is that since the Las Vegas shooting, one media report after another says that it is time to rethink Las Vegas security. Several hotels have already started using metal detectors to scan luggage and to scan people. Some reports are coming right out and saying that it is time for airport security scanners to be installed around Las Vegas. And you can bet that if that happens, Michael Chertoff and his security clients will be ready to make a deal. In the end, we can't say with any certainty that the Chertoff Group or Sheldon Adelson had any role whatsoever in the Las Vegas shooting drama, but it is a viable theory. And in an age when our own mainstream media refuses to do true investigative journalism for the good of society, it is up to us as citizens to look under every rock and around every corner until we find the culprits responsible for the tragic massacre in Las Vegas. For the End Times News Report, I'm Jake Morphonios.